Okay, it's now 5:04 p.m. This is the public meeting of the City Commission of the City of Brownsville. Pursuant to Chapter 551, Title 5, Section 551.041 of the Texas Government Code of the Texas Open Meetings Act, notice was given that the City Commission of the City of Brownsville would conduct a regular meeting on Tuesday, October 20th, 2020 at 5 p.m. via the WebEx link provided on the City of Brownsville Agenda Center. Members of the public wishing to participate in the meeting hosted through the WebEx teleconference could also join through a phone number on the Agenda Center. Members of the public who submitted a public comment form will be permitted to offer public comments as provided by the agenda and as permitted by the presiding officer during the meeting. A recording of the meeting will be made and will be available to the public in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. So it is now 5:05 p.m. and we can call the meeting to order. We need to have a short roll call. I have Mayor Mendez as present. I have Commissioner Gowan as present.
Present.
I have Commissioner Munguia as present.
Present.
I have Commissioner Golonsky-Pesanya as present. Is Commissioner Cowan present yet?
I'm present.
Okay. And Commissioner Tetro, are you present? Okay, so she is not present yet, and Commissioner Neese has indicated that he will be absent. All right, so we will now have our invocation from Pastor Brad Burke.
Let's pray. Father God, we thank you for the many blessings that we have here in Brownsville. We thank you for your love, your grace, and your mercy. And Lord, for those that need healing, we ask you to bring healing. For those that have lost loved ones, we ask you to bring comfort and blessing. For those that have lost income during this time, we ask you to bless and prosper them and lead and guide all of us in those issues. And Lord, we ask you to lead and guide our voters during this time. Lead and guide them as to who to vote for, and we ask you to give us the leaders that are best for this nation. We ask for a special blessing on Remy Garza and all of our election workers, Lord God, for a smooth, clear, accurate count of the votes. Lead and guide everyone in those issues. Lord, we ask you to bless Mayor Mendez and all of our city commissioners tonight and everyone that presents anything for the best for the city of Brownsville. And we ask all of these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. And we'll have a short moment of silence where we can all add our prayers to what has already been spoken. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you.
Our next item is our public comment period. We did not receive any public comment forms, so we don't have any. So we can move on to our consent agenda items 1 through 10.
Okay, I'm looking for a motion.
I take a few things out of order. I would like to pull out the minutes of August 18th and September 1st, and then also agenda item number 4. Otherwise, I move to approve the rest of
Okay, we have a motion to pull.
the items in the consent agenda.
We have a motion to take out items 1 and 4 and approve everything else. And a second from Dr. Gowan. Any additional
Yes.
discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. Let's take up item 1, the minutes. Commissioner Golonsky, do you have some proposed changes?
For the items that are discussed in executive session, so far it's only been recorded on action items, and just for the sake of transparency, I'm going to propose that from now on, even if we don't take action or it's not fully presented as is the first item and the minutes for August 18th, if we could note that, just so that it's a better record that accurately reflects what happens, and then that way, if we're reading it down the line.
Okay, so what you're asking then
we're
is
likely
that,
to remember what it's about.
okay, so what you're asking then is that if there's no action, that no action be noted? Commissioner, you're having some
Yes, so for
connectivity issues.
example, on August 18th of the minutes, we had two executive session items. That was this, yeah. Here, hold-
Commissioner, your connection's breaking up.
Can you hear me now?
We can right now.
Let me,
Yes, yes.
can, okay. Hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
What I'm trying to suggest, so for example, on August 18th, we had two agenda items. That was the super long meeting. And the first item, I misquoted, I misstated. It wasn't, we didn't table it, but it wasn't presented because of a constraint. Like we were all at night stuff. So if we could just, that item was not presented to us. And so it was postponed to the September 1st meeting, something to that effect. Similarly to the September 1st meeting, the first item in the executive session was presented to us, but because we needed more information, it was postponed to today's agenda. So if we could have stuff like that noted in the minutes.
Okay.
If I may assist, Mayor, because this is an item that I did discuss with Commissioner Galonsky.
Yes,
I
Council.
think she's having issues with the connection. What she
Right.
wants to convey is that there are certain items that the agenda will reflect were considered and perhaps were discussed in executive session, when in fact some of those presentations were not made to begin with, and so there was no consideration by the commission, and she would like the agendas to be so noted so that the public can tell whether items were actually considered by the commission in executive session or not. So she just wants those notations made on future agenda minutes for transparency. And I don't see anything legally wrong with that.
I don't have an issue with that either.
And can I just add, Commissioner Galonsky had pointed that out to us, and so for the August 18th minutes, we did note that in our changes, but we will note that also in the September.
Okay. So then, that being considered, do we have a motion then to approve the minutes of August 18th and September 1st?
So moved.
We have a motion.
Yeah,
and a second?
contingent on having those revisions made, and maybe for it to happen from now on forward.
That's fine, Commissioner. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It passes. Okay, item number 4.
So for agenda item number 4, that's a bulk order of PPE, and one of the things that was ordered was face masks, and I was wondering if there's a new local producer of face masks. I was wondering if he submitted a bid or if he was informed. I suspect maybe not, because he just started producing them in September and the request for bids was made in August. But I just wanted to get some clarification on that.
Honorable Mayor, City Commission, this is Jose Perez, Procurement Division. We actually were very fortunate to meet with this particular vendor. So we did actually have some preliminary meetings with them. We also provided them the details of this solicitation for them to potentially participate. Fortunately, they did participate in the solicitation. However, we did receive very competitive bid prices, so they were not the lowest.
Thank you, Mr. Pettis.
Even if you apply the local rule, like within the 5% guideline?
We would have to run the figures on that, but from what I recall, some of those were roughly 50. There were twice as expensive as the lowest, or sometimes it was a little bit higher than that, ma'am, but we can definitely check an analysis on that to determine if it would be eligible.
Okay, thank you. So to that end, I would propose that we accept everything but that proposal, and just based on verification of whether he meets the local rule, and if not, then we give it to the lowest bidder.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, there was so many face mask items on there. I don't know which one you're talking about particularly.
Sorry, he only qualifies for the 3-ply one.
Okay. Council, do you see any issues with the motion as stated?
I believe this award may be together as a package, so just to make it cleaner, I guess the commission, if the acquisition of this mask is not on an emergency basis, maybe tabling the item until the next meeting, maybe a cleaner way to look at it. But if there's some exigency in acquiring this PPE, then I would suggest that perhaps a vote on the item altogether.
Being that
What
it's
is,
key, I would assume that we need it. But can somebody chime in on that?
Currently, this is Roxanne from Internal Services. Currently, we are sufficiently stocked, except for that 3-ply. And then, again, we're trying to use CARES funding, and the goal is to try to get us stocked up to an appropriate amount based on our burn rate. So
are you,
okay?
Roxana, are you out of the 3-ply? I mean, I don't mean specifically out, but are you running very low?
Yes. Well,
And
low enough to sustain us for a month or so. I mean, we can survive with it until we resolve this.
Okay, then did this all go together or not?
So Commissioners, Mayor, the intent here was for us to do a bulk purchase. However, we did actually receive various low bids for particular items. So there is no one vendor is going to be awarded everything. So I believe we do have the flexibility to explore this option.
Okay, so then, Mr. Perez, if we were then to approve everything with the exception of the 3-ply mask, you think we'll be okay then?
I believe so, Mayor.
Okay. Very good, thank you. All right, so then we
Mayor-
motion. Go ahead.
Mayor, and maybe we could decide, for the sake of expediency, so we don't run too low on our supplies, to add this item next agenda.
Yes.
Don't we have a meeting next week rather than waiting for two future meetings?
That's fine. I don't have an issue with that, Commissioner. Okay, so we do have a motion on the table then. Do I have a second? We have a second. Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes.
Okay, Mayor, are we ready to move on to public hearings?
Yes, we are.
Okay, public hearings, item 1, public hearing and action on first reading on ordinance number 235-2020-025 to amend the zoning map from dwelling A to light commercial C1 for lot 15, block 7, Morningside Estates subdivision, section 1, Cameron County, Texas, located at 654 Morningside Road, Brownsville, Texas, 78521, as shown in Exhibit A. This is in District 1.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Commissioners. Next slide, please. So this property consists of 0.16 acres. The current zoning is dwelling A. The applicant is looking to change the designation to light commercial, C1. The proposed use is a bakery / wet store / wet restaurant. The property is fronting Morningside Road. Staff does want to point out that this property has been used as a bakery and as a wet store for the past 55 plus years. So it's been around for a really long time. Right now, the owner, they want to add a restaurant use on which they want to sell alcohol for on-premise consumption. And since the property is zoned dwelling, adding this use triggers the necessity to have it comply with zoning regulations. So this is an aerial view of the property. Can you please go back to the previous slide? This is an aerial view of the property. It is right on the corner of Central Avenue and Morningside. Along Morningside, there is a variety of existing commercial uses. There are other convenience stores. There are some restaurants. There's mechanic shops and professional offices. There's notary public offices as well. To the south, mostly there is residential or single family use, and to the north, there is a mobile home park and some undeveloped land. Next slide. This is the zoning map. What predominates is the dwelling zoning. There is also some apartments, some light commercial, and some light industrial. Next slide. This is a 200-foot buffer map. There were 28 mailouts and 0 written opposition. Next slide. Here's another bird's eye view of the property. Next slide. So this request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and future land use plan. P&Z does recommend approval to rezone from dwelling A to light commercial C1. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Vega. This is a public hearing. Is there anybody here on this item? Okay, do you have a motion to close?
I'll move to close the public hearing.
We have a motion to close public hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, do I have any motions on the item?
I'll move to approve.
We have a motion. We have a motion to
Second.
approve. And a second.
Second.
Any additional discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Public hearing, item number 2, public hearing and action on first reading on ordinance number 235-2020-026 to amend the zoning map from dwelling A to dwelling B for lot 48, block 49, East Brownsville subdivision, section 6, Cameron County, Texas, located at 3625 Ramita Street, Brownsville, Texas, 78521, as shown in Exhibit A. This is in District 1.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. Nice to see you all again. The property owner is requesting to rezone the property from dwelling A district to dwelling G in order to construct a duplex. Currently, the property is 0.14 acres or about 7,400 square feet, give or take. The property is fronting Ramirez Street. Next slide, please. This is an aerial view of the property. As you can see, the majority of the surrounding land uses are single-family uses. There's also some duplexes in the immediate area. There's also a public basketball court there along Ramirez Lane as well. Next slide, please. Next, we have the zoning map. You can see that most of it is dwelling with some development trends for duplex use in the area. Next slide, please. This is the buffer map that we saw earlier. Not that same one, but it's a buffer map that we send out to the neighborhood at least 200 feet from the subject property. Legal notices were sent out. 34 were actually sent out, and we received no opposition. We did get some phone calls just to get inquiries, but no official opposition. Here we have a bird's eye view of the property. It's currently vacant. As you can see immediately south of that, there's already a few duplexes that were built. So like I mentioned earlier, the development trend in the area is single family and duplex use as well. Next slide, please. And based on that, the Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval to rezone from dwelling A to dwelling G. I'm available to take any questions at this time.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Garces? Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing. Is there anybody here on this item? Okay, do I have a motion to close?
To close?
We have a motion to close. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, motion passes. Do I have any motions on the item?
Motion to approve?
We have a motion to approve in a second.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Commissioners.
Thanks.
We'll move on to items for individual consideration. Item 1 is approval on second and final reading on ordinance number 2020-1675, granting a franchise license to Republic Services Incorporated, a publicly traded company, for residential waste services as well as certain recycling services based on the terms and conditions recited therein.
Okay, it's my understanding that administration's asking to table this item. Mr. Bernal?
Yes, yes, Mayor, that is correct. There's some legal language pending on the franchise ordinance, and we were advised for our legal counsel to defer to the next meeting to ensure that's completed. So we'll come back and bring that complete, but also we have a rate comparison presentation to share, and we'll just do that all at the next meeting.
Okay, very good. So, council, do we need a motion for that?
If you're tabling, yes. If you're just passing to the next meeting, no.
Okay, so then, Mr. Bernal, we'll just go ahead and pass it to the next meeting. Is that right?
Right, no action, and then we can just pass it to the November 3rd meeting.
Okay, very good. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor.
Next item.
Item number 2, consideration and action to award a contract to the University of Texas School of Public Health for laboratory services in the amount of $468,000 to be paid by CARES funding.
Mayor, for the commission, this is Armida Gonzalez. I've been working with Art on this project, and we just have a quick little presentation. So, it's no mystery. Next slide. It's no mystery that Brownsville, when COVID hit, the Rio Grande Valley was not prepared with regards to lab services. And so one of the issues that we saw with COVID-19 was the turnaround time and the dependency on external labs and labs that are outside the valley. So we believe that this is a proposal to not only have additional testing capacity for COVID-19, but really it sets up the community to be sustainable and in other instances, in other public health emergencies, having a lab that here locally ran by an institution like University of Texas Health School is extremely important. So this, we look at this investment as not only an investment for today, but it is an investment for the future. And so next slide. There have been other cases of public health emergencies. The anthrax scare in 2001, 2002, and then the H1N1 in 2009. This slide does not also include Zika, which happened a couple years ago, which we were also in a very similar predicament with regards to lab capacity. Next slide. So we all know the first one was reported in March 2020. The issue with COVID-19 testing has over and over been been the lab capacity. And luckily, the University of Texas RGV Med School has a lab, but even then, that lab is not necessarily, we could afford in the Valley to have another lab doing this, the same amount of work. Next slide. And so, private labs and public health labs have differences. Obviously, private run labs are looking at the bottom line, and they're not necessarily participating in research or surveillance and monitoring. So, having a lab here in Brownsville allows us to do the work more efficiently, better. And also, be able to control an outbreak quicker. And so we look forward to this partnership. Next slide. And this is just the differences between a public health lab and a private lab. Next slide. And next slide. The proposal here is not only, once again, is not only a COVID-19 testing, but you can see that once you have a lab, you can test for a variety of things, and we believe that this is the most important part of this proposal. Which, once again, having a lab here in Brownsville that can do this kind of work is puts us at an advantage. Next slide. And so I think I took a couple of quotes. So this is the lab capacity. At full capacity, this lab could process 7,000 swabs, 11,000 saliva tests, or 5,000 antibodies. So if you think about the requirement for testing, and testing being the proven solution, having this capacity would put us at an advantage like no other city. So next slide. So I think I took a couple of quotes from a variety of articles. It's really hard to find research on the importance of testing at this point. Next slide. But these are some of the things. It all revolves around testing. It comes back to, you have to have good testing to really get the economy back up and running, and to be able to attack an outbreak. So once you do get an outbreak, if you have 24-hour or 48-hour response time, you're going to be able to kind of put that kind of close the circle really quick. So next slide. And so, this talks about South Korea, and if you've read anything about South Korea or New Zealand, that's the way, testing is the way they've been able to control the COVID-19 outbreak. And New Zealand is probably the best case, where I don't believe they've had a COVID outbreak, in 3 or 4 months now. Keep the next slide. So in summary, what does this proposal do? It obviously brings a lab to Brownsville, a much needed lab. It could reduce the spread of the disease through rapid testing, like I already said. Ensure contact tracing, a rapid turnaround time, and also it reduced costs by 40%. So, and Art will talk about costs in the next slide. So next slide. Not only long-term benefits of this health lab, obviously it does include a job creation component, which is 6 new positions and 4 other lab tech positions. From an economic development perspective, like I said, the economy cannot get back and running at a full capacity without extremely good testing. So next slide. And so this is where Art will talk about the cost differences. So Art. kick it over to
So,
you.
Honorable Mayor, Commissioners, good evening. I wanted to show a comparative, some numbers. Had we been in contract with UT Health at the cost that they're proposing, we would have saved a significant amount of CARES funding. The professional labs are charging us $110 for PCR tests. And at the time, that was the cheapest test we could get. Even when we went out to UTRGV, the cheapest we could get for a PCR test was $70. What this agreement does is it does two things. It allows us to build up capacity locally in Brownsville to be able to have the test run within 24 hours and be able to have the results using state-of-the-art software in a very quick fashion. And in July, one of the biggest lessons we learned was that some of our test results were taking up to 10 to 14 days to come back. So a big part of our initiative is to reduce that turnaround time. But a second part and more important part as well is that we're going to get the test kits done at a much lower cost. And it's beyond the PCR testing. We will now have a future ability to be able to do PCR testing using a new technique that uses saliva at $10 a test. And then test kits using IgG antibody testing, which is something we have been having a conversation about. But the specificity and the sensitivity are now at a certain point where Dr. McCormick and his team at UT Health feel very comfortable with moving forward with an IgG antibody test. Next slide. So if this was July, and if you remember in July, right after the Memorial Holiday and Father's Day and the 4th of July, we were seeing up to almost 900 to 1,000 tests per day. We paid at the 110 rate close to 454,000 to. Had we been in a contract where we're paying these rates, we would have only paid about 234,000. That is a dash, not a negative sign, just for the record and people viewing that. We would have paid about half of the amount that we paid now. So in many ways, not only does this bring resiliency and capacity to Brownsville, it also allows us to enter into a contract where not only the city, the county, and a few other communities will be joining to put this regional laboratory together that we feel is an important step forward in building resiliency in our community. Next slide. And I believe that's the last slide.
I think that's it, Art.
Yes.
So I think at this point, Mayor and Commissioners, the item before you is to approve this funding. And there is other partners. So we're not the only ones. I believe the UT School of Public Health has reached out to the county and to Harlingen. At this point, everybody's kind of waiting for everybody to do something. So in this case, we would be the first ones to commit. But I think Dr. Reiniger believes that we would be the first domino per se, and then the county would quickly come after us, and then the city of Harlingen and the island, I believe. So with that, if there's any questions, Dr. Reiniger is here. I see her on the screen there, and we'll entertain any questions you may have.
Ramiro, we don't need the other partners involved in order to move forward on this, right? Like if the county or the other cities decide they don't want to do it, we're still okay. Nothing changes for us, right?
Nothing changes for us except, I believe that the other partners are needed. There's more financial needs to start the lab, right? This would cover us, but as far as getting the lab up and running, there would be some additional needs that UT Health has asked the county to commit to, and the city of Harlingen.
Okay, and then how quickly do we anticipate something like this would actually get started and we can start seeing the savings? Would that be a couple weeks, a month? What are we looking at?
Dr. Reiniger, I don't know how to answer those.
Sure. Thank you, Commission, Mayor Mendez, for letting us be here. The lead time on getting the equipment here is about 6 to 8 weeks from the placement of the order. And to your earlier question, we would need the city and the county in particular to be able to have the funding to purchase the equipment and move that forward. And then, so that's the key pin here.
Okay. we have any other questions?
Dr. Reiniger may perhaps mention the resources that UT Health is putting into this initiative as well.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Gowan. I'm pleased to. The UT Health School of Public Health has identified $300,000 of funding that we are also putting into this partnership. We feel like the work with our city, our counties, and then UT Health together creates this public health lab that really will be unlike anything seen in the region. So UT is very committed to this work and putting skin in the game.
Great. And Dr. McCormick and Dr. Fisherhawk, might you say a word about any other barriers that we would need to know about? I know that you've just received your CLIA. Are there any other barriers that we might help you surpass besides this funding?
I can't think. The big barrier, of course, was to get our CLIA started, and that is now done. We also have, I believe, our COLA, which is another organization that we have to, some hoops we have to jump through, and I believe that's also done. So no, we are prepared to get started as soon as we have the equipment. And as Dr. Reiniger said, we have resources from the university to bring in more personnel so that we can achieve what Dr. Rodriguez pointed out was a rapid turnaround at a reasonable price. And I think that's really, that is our goal, to be able to do that. But also our goal in the future is to be able to make the laboratory available for other either small outbreaks that we see periodically that can range from Zika to hepatitis to other infections. One of the really important things about this modern era is that so many infections in the past that really required heavy-duty laboratories, expensive laboratories, to try to isolate virus in tissue culture, to try to grow bacteria in culture. Those are animals, and even sometimes using animals. If you remember Legionnaire's disease that occurred some decades ago, that actually was done by using animals. So all of that has now been essentially eliminated for diagnostic laboratories because now we have molecular techniques, and the PCR is a wonderful example. We have the rapid antigen tests are also molecular tests. And then the antibody tests, we're already going to start doing a few antibody tests as we speak, because we're following up people with COVID to try to understand some long-term consequences. And so we want to be able to identify people from the community, which we're already doing in our clinical research unit, to identify people with COVID and then look to see what other things are happening to them in the long term. So there are many things that we can do like this that will, I think, help the community, help the health department to be able to make good decisions about many of these issues and make them in a timely fashion. We also are proposing in a separate one, but I think it is important to point out how much we've been working with the city and the county to build databases, and trying to integrate the laboratory with these databases will also provide us with a much more comprehensive system and a way to be prepared in the future, because I'm absolutely, one, COVID is not over, so don't think we're not done yet, as you can see from the country. But two, it prepares us then in a much better way than we were this time for future pandemics.
And my last question to all three of you is, I would imagine that this lab's existence and operation will provide opportunities for our students, graduate and undergraduate students, to have educational options that they don't have currently. Am I right?
Absolutely, and particularly in our Brownsville campus, we will be able to involve students, both master's, doctoral, and undergraduate.
Absolutely. I would like to add that we already have a doctoral student who's working on some of the data, and she is a native of Cameron Park. and we're very proud of her.
And we have another doctoral student who's in the laboratory, and she's one of our main gurus for PCR, because she's been working with Dr. Lee on our faculty, and she's been doing PCR now for 2 or 3 years of her doctoral degree. And so, along with Marcella Morris, also from the community, who is the laboratory director, this is a program that really does provide opportunities for students, but also it involves people already from the community. That's been one of our big commitments since we've been here, and it will remain our commitment as we move forward.
Well, I appreciate all the work y'all have done so far in helping us through this up to this point. I know we still got a long way to go, and we're starting to see some trending back the other way, I think. But this helps, and having this in place is definitely going to help us. So I appreciate everybody who's worked on this so far. All right, do we have any other questions?
I have a couple questions. First of all, I really I think this is a really important initiative. But is there an update on the rapid PCR test, or the same day testing that I know has been in the works for a while? But I think that would it would be helpful to get an update, and then also sustainability for this lab in terms of what happens after this funding runs out. How is the lab going to continue to operate going forward?
Yeah, thank you so much, Commissioner Cowan, for those questions. Let me take the second question and talk about sustainability a little bit, our plans for sustainability, because you're exactly right. There's the launching of the lab and the costs associated with that, but then the sustainability, we don't want it to be gone. We need this long term. So, the equipment that we're purchasing is equipment that has a shelf life of 6 to 8 years, consistent use. So it is a good long-term investment. And we're looking at setting up this lab in a way that it is partially business, run as a business would be run, and then as well there'll be some indigent care coverage that we need to look at. So on the business side of it, we will be able to bill health insurance for the patients who have health insurance, which we know is about half of our population. We would be able to work with local businesses who may want to get their employees back to work quickly and isolate and keep their businesses open. So we would be able to have a contract with those types of organizations that want that service that way. So there's the business end of that, and we would obviously be planning in the cost to be able to replace equipment, et cetera. So it's a long-term view on that. But in addition to that, we will be writing grants with you, for example, in partnership with the city for the indigent care coverage that we know. We know we got 50% of the population that doesn't have a billable source. So we need to be able to cover those costs too. From a public health perspective, that only makes sense to you got to be able to test for everybody. So we would be able to look at indigent care coverage through partnerships and grant writing. And then, I think we're all in the same boat in the sense that the state of Texas needs to continue to search for solutions for indigent care coverage. But that right now is our sustainability plan, and we feel confident that we will be able to do that with you all and show the sustainability. I am going to turn your first question, which is really about the rapid test. Probably, I think you're talking about antigen tests. I'm going to pitch that one to Dr. McCormick. Dr. McCormick?
Yes. So thanks, Commissioner, for your question. The rapid tests that we're talking about now, the ones that turn around in a matter of minutes, sometimes 15 minutes, those are what we call antigen detection tests. Those tests use antibodies that are made against the proteins of the virus. And so it's only detecting the proteins if they're there. It is not as sensitive because with the rapid PCR, even a PCR test takes typically 45 minutes to an hour or 2 hours, depending on how sensitive you want it to be. And this whole area is a rapidly moving target, I can tell you, because new tests are coming out all the time. And one of the things that we have planned carefully in our plans for this laboratory, for example, is to be able to take advantage of a new method of testing for PCR. Now, this is a PCR test, a full-fledged PCR test, but it's much faster because you can take saliva and do the PCR test directly on the saliva without all of the other time-consuming processes that were being used in the past. This was developed by Yale and is now in the process of being approved publicly by the FDA. They've already given emergency use. So we'll be able to do that test. And one advantage is that people can do, they can do their own collection. All you have to do is, these exist already, is basically to put saliva in a tube into a tube, put a top on it, and send it to the laboratory. We can run it straight away without doing a lot of other things. So that means that we can do the PCR test from kind of start to finish in an hour and a half to 2 hours. So that's the PCR. Now the rapid antigen tests are also coming online much more effectively. In the past, there were some that had to be retracted because it turns out they were at best 50% effective. The difference is that PCR, you're amplifying. With the other, you're just finding whatever is there. That's the difference. And so we are put in a position to be able to also do the rapid antigen test, and we will plan that as well. In addition, we will be able to do the antibody test, and that is built into the budget that we have submitted for this. So I hope that helps to answer the questions about, and so the key thing here is to be nimble. If you're not, you'll get behind very quickly.
Thank you so much.
Okay, any additional questions? All right, do we have any motions on this?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 3, consideration and action to award contract SMP-19-0320 for professional services to Half Associates Incorporated for the Brownsville Sidewalks and Trails Master Plan in the amount of $168,000, RFP-SMP-19-0320.
Mayor and City Commissioners, good afternoon. My name is Joel Garza. I'm the Mobility Director. And so today we have before you the Sidewalk and Trail Master Plan. During the 2013, the city was able to do Connecting Bronzeville that identified several key projects in the city of Bronzeville. Since then, that was 7 years ago, a lot of the projects that were in there have been either implemented or have been planned, and we continue to update that. With that said, we would like to do an update to that and add the sidewalk components. And so the new plan will identify the current conditions and gaps in connectivity. We'll also produce a list of priority projects. And so what has been done that was based on the 2013 plan, what is still in the planning stages, and then what future projects will be needed to be developed. During the pandemic, I know bicycle usage has gone substantially increased. And so that has highlighted the use of trails in the city of Bronzeville. And so we went through the RFP process. It was released back in February. I know 7 firms did submit. The evaluation committee met together several times during the summer months, and Half Associates was ranked the highest. After negotiations and looking at the scope of work, we were able to negotiate the fee of $168,000. And staff recommends approval. And I can take any questions.
I think it's excellent that you're doing this, and I think it's excellent that Half Associates is going to be doing the work since they did the master plan, and there will be and the active plan. So there's going to be continuity there, which is they're always wanted.
Correct, Commissioner.
Mr. Garza, when was the last update for this, or when was the last time that they looked at this issue?
So as a citywide, the last time was the 2013 plan. Overall, we did have a active transportation for the region as a county back in 2016. And so even like that, it's been several years. And so we feel that the need is now there to make sure that we hire someone that is the expert in the area. Especially have did do the 2017 plan, also did the active transportation plan in 2016 for Cameron County. And so I think that helps us have that continuity like Commissioner Gowan mentioned.
Okay, thank you.
And includes the whole city, right?
Yes, ma'am. And so what we did in the RFP, we divided it by districts. And so each district will have its individual recommendation of projects.
Okay, because for our part of town, does it contemplate the East Loop once it goes in the way it's envisioned? Because I would love to have it or something all the way out to Palm Grove and that area. But then
that's a good point. That's something that we can, now that we have a more definite area of the East Loop, obviously we can look at that. How do we add the bike and ped component to that area?
Okay, because well, that's all city, but some of it is county. Will that be a problem? Like especially around Lopez, where they need the sidewalks. But I saw that there was the schools, the BISD would do something separate for that.
So we have also in this proposal to look at the schools, and so we're using each BISD and having that 1 mile buffer. And so even if it expands into our ETJ, we're still gonna look at it.
Okay, this might not be the right time, but to bring it up, but just so that I remember, whenever I go out to Palm Grove in that area, or the Ocelot development, which is, I think it's Indiana, you see a lot of people walking along Southmost, which kind of concerns me because even though it's rural area, it'd be nice if we had trails for them, and then maybe connect Sable Palm. But that's just something to look forward to. I don't know if I'll ever get to have any input, but that's one of the things I'd like.
No, of course, Commissioner, and obviously through the process, we will have the consultant, we'll sit down with the stakeholder, we will have a bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee that will kind of be the steering committee for this. And so I think those comments, obviously we heard them today, but we'll come back to each of you individually and make sure what is the needs of the area.
Thank you.
And I would say, Commissioner Galansky, that Half Associates does a very good job of taking comments and listening to the stakeholders. They're very approachable, and they usually have quite a robust public comment session. So you can have your constituents go to those meetings and say, you know, I like this, I need this, and they're very responsive.
Because that's an area that's growing, but I suspect that in 20, 30 years, it'll be a lot more populated. So we may as well plan for them now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, looking for a motion?
I'll move
Do you
to
have a motion?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve and a second. Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 4, consideration and action to accept the donation of a historic military Bell UH-1 Iroquois Huey helicopter to be displayed at Veterans Park.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Commission. It is my pleasure pleasure to present this item to you. And in alignment with our policy for naming, renaming, dedication, sponsorship of city facilities, and the acceptance of donations policy, it requires a few things to be considered. Next slide, please. And the following points to be considered are that when we accept a donation, it must have approval by the city commission. The city will assume ownership, control, and maintenance of any donated property or item unless the conditions of acceptance as determined by the city provides otherwise. The city shall not be obligated to repair or replace any donated item that is damaged or destroyed for any reason, such as vandalism or theft, or in the case of live plants, if they die. Further, unless the conditions of acceptance as determined by the city provide otherwise, the city will decide when changes shall be made to the city facility, if that was the donation, with no assurance that a donated item will be retained. And lastly, the city reserves the right to remove and or relocate any donated item at any time. However, if a donated item needs to be removed, the city will make every reasonable attempt to relocate the item if such a need exists. And the city will attempt to notify the donor of any changes. So that is all I have to present on the requirements of accepting the donation. And I'll answer any questions, but if there's none, it'll be my honor and pleasure to present to you, Mr. Tony Garcia, Executive Director and founder of Warriors United in Arms, and the Secretary, Mr. Victor Sabala, who have a brief presentation to share. Any questions?
Gentlemen, go ahead. Thank you, Damaris.
You're welcome.
Okay, we're unmuted now. I want to take this opportunity to address the city council and talk about this Huey. You know, the United States of A signed on in April 75. 58,479 lives were lost. And this is 37 people that have not been accounted for. Others are still suffering from this war. Families and all of us. The ground. One man at the most given this reacting. It was something that happy to hear. It meant the relief resupply were on the way. Sometimes it meant evacuation or rescue from a fire zone. More often it meant that wounded were being transported to medical facilities. I was a crew chief on the C-78 aircraft, but my living quarters yards from the landing pad. And it's bringing in the dead and the helicopter. It said utilized. It was a workhorse in the battlefield. Next slide. My name's Tony Garcia, and I'm the founder of the Veterans Warriors United in Arms. Just for your information, if you haven't been to the park lately, we put up 2 pagodas there. We did some landscaping to get the help of Home Depot. We put in about $15,000 worth of work and material into the park, and we thank the mayors for allowing us to participate in the beautification of the park. As my friend Victor, you know, this helicopter first went into Vietnam in March of 1962. That's almost 60 years ago, and it's still flying. Victor has a recording there that's going to play for you. And believe me, from somebody that flew on that helicopter, the guys on the ground, they were expecting everything from mail from home to life-saving equipment, radio, batteries, water, medication, ammo. Victor will play the sound, which I will never forget. The Army worked first, and it was fully, but it was, it belonged to the government. If they ever want it back, they can have it. But anyway, what we asked of the city is to build a platform for none of them. With the nose down, the attitude that was with the number. We'd like to landscape it with tropical plants, perhaps reflect the ground waiting for the helicopter. We'll turn this place into a park, a hotter. And remember all those that we'll go to the moon o'clock in place soon. We hope. Now listen to this. Vietnam veterans immediately. Was asked, did Vietnam affect you? But then the question was asked, what do you think of when you hear the Huey helicopter? It's in my roots. It's something that's deeply embedded in us. I think it's something that we need to show community, to share with them so they understand that, because most of us guys are in our 70s. We want to pass this on to generations. That particular helicopter, I flew in it 3 times. And every time that I flew in it, it was to pick up wounded or the deceased. Sometimes I can still smell the blood in my hands, even though this happened 50 years ago. That memory well embedded in my brain. Well, and that helicopter is responsible for hundreds of thousands of lives that were saved in Vietnam. They used to say there was a golden hour. If you got shot and you could make it to a medevac aircraft, we used to call them dust-offs back in those days. If you could make it to a mesh unit, the temporary hospitals, field hospitals, within an hour, that was a golden hour. You had about an 85% chance of surviving. To us, it means a lot because we have been forgotten by the United States government. When they called, we answered. And when we came back, we were disrespected. And we still run into people that have hatred for the Vietnam veterans. I had about the helicopter. The important thing is we lost 38 men from Brownsville, the war in Vietnam, in 15 years. Some of them were my schoolmates. Some of them got drafted when we were still in high school in our senior year. And the day that we graduated, the following day, some of my friends were on their way to induction into the United States Army. I know that all of you are quite young and probably don't remember about this, but to us that fought that war, there is no words that can explain what my eyes have seen, what my nose have smelled, and what my heart has felt, and the fear that I went through. Thank God we made it back, but I still haven't forgotten the 38 men from Brownsville that lost their lives. And I hope that you all will grant us the opportunity to memorialize these people that lost their lives. There is nothing greater than for somebody to give up his life for your tomorrows. These guys are very brave. These pilots were flying into combat, being shot at time over time to rescue the wounded and to evacuate those that needed to be evacuated. As far as we know, there's no helicopter in this place. You see, before you describe the proposed height of the helicopter, when we ask to consider this, we will continue to work on obtaining the helicopter along with the Congressman's office. We will look at the costs as far as maintenance, it'll be minimal. Once it's in place, we'll hardly have to do anything with it. But anyhow, we hope that you will consider this and make this truly a project that the whole city and the county of South Texas will be part of. And I'd like to have Brownsville as the all veteran city. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, gentlemen, and that was a wonderful presentation. I don't think saying thank you is enough to either of you or anybody else that has served, but that's the best thing we can tell you right now is thank you, and we really genuinely are not going to forget the gentlemen and ladies that have served in the military, especially those at Vietnam. It's my father was in the Army, my sister was as well, so this means a lot to me, and I appreciate everything that both of you gentlemen have done for veterans in our city, and I think this is one of the easiest things we're probably going to have to take up. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you from me as well. My father was a Marine Corps sergeant during the Korean War, and I love seeing his name at Veterans Park. And my daughter's active duty Coast Guard. So I would like to make a motion to accept this helicopter.
No motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any additional discussion?
I hope you'll consider doing an interpretive tour once it's located at the Veterans Park, especially like a Memorial Day or Veterans Day.
We would love to, man. We want to publicize patriotism. Unfortunately, in the way things are in this country, patriotism is on the back burner. But we that were there, we are patriots. At our age, in our early 70s, middle 70s, we're willing to do it again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We have an motion and a second. Any additional discussion? Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you both. This is exciting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Commission.
We'll move on to item 5, consideration and action to authorize the City of Brownsville Multimodal Transportation Brownsville Metro to offer free rides on the general election of November 3rd, 2020.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. At the request of some other citizens to the Transit Advisory Committee, B Metro, they were requesting B Metro to provide free rides to voters on November 3rd's general election, stating that voting is a right and a privilege, and that during the 2016 election, 15 million eligible voters did not vote because they did not have transportation to the polling places. And since public transportation is an essential service, it is recommended to offer free rides to all riders on November the 3rd to encourage and provide the opportunity for citizens wanting to vote. And at this time, that's a request. The Transit Committee did meet on October the 7th and voted that we bring this item before you for authorization to provide free rides on the day that it was requested by the citizens.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, looking for a motion.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve. The second.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any additional discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I'm gonna ask that this last item be passed into after the very short presentation executive session.
Very good, Council. I don't have an issue with that. We don't need a motion on that, do we?
No, if you'll just approve, it be taken.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. So the next item then is executive session.
All right, Mayor, I'll read the 3 items for executive session: discussion and deliberation regarding real property pursuant to section 551.072 of the Texas Government Code related to the value of real property identified in possible condemnation proceedings as land tract RGV-HRL 7212, where deliberation in an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the position of the governmental body in negotiations with a third person. Item 2 is attorney consultation pursuant to section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code to provide legal advice in connection with pending litigation, arbitration, styled and numbered NRA BFFA grievance number 2019-03, Article 24, retiree healthcare benefits and related legal issues. And item 3 is consultation with attorney to receive confidential legal advice pursuant to section 551.071, subsection 2 of the Texas Government Code on a matter related to municipal services for land annexed to ordinance number 95-1200.11, in which the duty of the attorney to the governmental body under the Texas disciplinary rules of professional conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflicts with this chapter.
Okay, very good. Do we have a motion to go into executive session?
Motion to go to executive session?
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right. We're going to recess executive session. Thank you.
It is now 6:16 p.m. and we will go into executive session. we're back in regular session.
Thank you, Lori. Action item number 6. You going to read that item?
Yes, sir. Consideration and appropriate action, if any, approving the sale to the U.S. government of 0.437 of an acre, more specifically described as land tract RGV-HRL 7212, and authorizing the city manager to execute pertinent documents to carry out the sale.
All right, do we have any motions on this item? Oh, there's going to be a presentation. Is there? Okay.
Yeah, Mayor, I could just quickly go through it. It's exactly like an executive session. Basically, there's a tract of land that the government is offering to buy. And you can see here the offer, the accepted offer is $6,679 based on the Cameron County Appraisal District. So next slide, it shows you the location of the tract. And then the next slide shows you kind of the further location as a reference point. This is Los Indios. The city of Los Indios is on your right-hand side. So we ask you to give us direction with this item.
Very good. Mr. Gonzalez, thank you so much for that presentation. Do we have any motions?
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any additional discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you. All right, there being no further business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
We stand adjourned. Thank you all so much. Have a good night.
Have a good night. Thank you.
It is now 7:10 p.m. and the city commission meeting has ended.